So the South, the authors, they're getting a tradition of Shiloh, an ancient cultic site from the North. Now they're writing about this ancient place, and let's see how they do. I want you to notice the point of view the author takes. 1 Samuel. And there was one man from Ramathaim Zophim, from Mount Ephraim. His name was Elkanah, the son of Jeroham, the son of Elihu, the son of Tohu, the son of Zuph, an Ephraimite. And he had 2 wives. The name of one was Hannah, and the name of the other was Peninnah. And Peninnah had children, but Hannah had no children. And that man would go up from his city from appointed time to appointed time to prostrate himself, to slaughter peace offerings to Yud-Heh-Vav-Heh of hosts in Shiloh. And there the 2 sons of Eli, Hophni and Phinehas, were serving Yud-Heh-Vav-Heh. And she brought him with her when she had weaned him. I'm going to verse 22. I just want to point out the mention of Shiloh. So now Hannah has given birth to Samuel, and she's bringing him to the temple. And she brought him with her when she had weaned him, with 3 bulls and 1 ephah of meal and an earthenware jug of wine. And she brought him to the house of Yud-Heh-Vav-Heh, to Shiloh. And the children was young, and they slaughtered the bull, and they brought the child to Eli. Now, this is what Madam Alita just said. The person reading at this time has evidence of Shiloh with the Ark of Yud-Heh-Vav-Heh. It used to be there. So the person is reading this in his day. If you had written that she brought to the house of El, to Shiloh, they would not understand it. It's a tradition that predates them. And the person writing also is writing based on a tradition that he's received. The ark remained at Shiloh for a few hundred years, through most of the time period that we know as the period of the Judges. In 1 Samuel 4, the ark was taken from Shiloh to do battle against the Philistines. The decision turned out to be a bad one. Remember, this is all north. This is all north stuff. The decision turned, so let me repeat that. This is all north-south. That is south, and I telling the story. Those in the north took the ark. They're not supposed to take the ark, but they took the ark to do battle against the Philistines. This decision turned out to be a bad one. The ark was captured by the Philistines. When the news reached Eli, who was the priest, who was an old man by this time, he fell off his chair in the gate of the city of Shiloh in the north and died. We get it here. And a man of Benjamin, the names are critical. Benjamin is in the north. And a man of Benjamin ran from the battle array and came to Shiloh on that day, and his garments torn, and earth upon his head. And he came, and behold, Eli was sitting on the chair beside the road, anxiously waiting, for his heart trembled for the ark of Elohim, or El. You see, sometimes Mr. Jabet said it. He says, sometimes you put things in there and it exposes, it's, yeah. So here it's called the Ark of El, or Elohim, however you want to call it. Okay. And the man had come to tell in the city, and the whole city cried out. Now Eli heard the sound, or Eli heard the sound of the crowd, and he cried, and he said, "What is this confused noise?" And the man hurried and came and told Eli. Now Eli was 98 years old, and his eyes were set, and he could not see. And the man said to Eli, "I'm the one who has come from the battle array, and I fled from the battle array today." And he said, "What happened, my son?" And the one who had reported the news answered and said, "Israel fled before the Philistines. And also there was a great slaughter among the people. And also your two sons perished, Hophni and Phinehas. And the ark of El, or Elohim, was taken. Notice not the ark of Yud-Heh-Vav-Heh. And it was when he mentioned that the ark of Elohim, or El, that he, Eli, fell off the chair backward through the gate opening, and his neck broke, and he died. Because the man was old and weighty, and he had judged Israel for 40 years. When he was judging Israel, there was no Judah. We're looking at the time of the judges. I'll make a comment of the time of the judges later, but no, this is strictly northern. What happens? Well, the Philistines took the ark and brought it to Ashdod. They took it to Gath, and then they brought it to Ekron. Then they returned the ark of Yud-Heh-Vav-Heh to Israel, to the town of Beth Shemesh. The ark of Yud-Heh-Vav-Heh was then taken to the house of Abinadab in the town of Kirjat Jearim. It stayed there till David comes to move it. 2 Samuel 6. And David continued to gather all the children of Israel, 30,000. And David arose and went with all the people that were with him to bring up from there the ark of Elohim, which is called a name, the name of Yud-Heh-Vav-Heh of hosts, who dwell upon the cherubim, or the cherubim being upon it. And they set the ark of Elohim upon a new cart, and they carried it from the house of Abinadab that was on the hill, and Uzzah, the son of Abinadab, drove the new cart, and they brought it out of the house of Abinadab, which was on the hill, with the ark of Elohim. And this chap went before the ark. Okay. And David and all the house of Israel made merry with all manner of instruments, cypress wood, and with harps, and with psalteries, and with timbrels, and with sistra, and with cymbals. And they came to Goren Nahor, and Uzzah put forth his hand to the ark of Elohim, and grasped hold of it, for the oxen swayed it. So I want you to take a look at the point of view of the author, the southern author. Now, the stories of the sinful behavior of the priests at Shiloh, Hophni and Phinehas, Eli not rebuking them, the defeat of Israel by the Philistines, and then the season of the ark, and then the transfer of the ark from Shiloh, from the north, to Jerusalem, is being used or served as the Deuteronomistic ideology of a cultic parallel to the rejection of Saul and the election of David. So there is not just the rejection of Saul and then the election of David as individuals, you also have the rejection of the of the place at Shiloh in the north and the election of Jerusalem in the south. So stories of the sinful behavior of the priest at Shiloh, the defeat of Israel and the capture of the ark, the transfer of the ark from Shiloh, that is the north, to Jerusalem, the south. What is happening here? It's a Deuteronomistic ideology as a cultic parallel. It's a parallel. What we saw in David and Saul, here's Shiloh and Jerusalem. It's a cultic parallel to the rejection of Saul and the election of David. So the mention of Shiloh in the late Mosaic period, where we see Jeremiah talking about Shiloh, how he's going to make Shiloh or make Jerusalem like Shiloh, of that stuff. So the late Mosaic biblical reference to the destruction of Shiloh seems to constitute a polemic. They're speaking against an early northern Israelite shrine. But the primary traditions regarding this shrine originated in northern circles in earlier days. And it was in 7020 BCE, the fall of the northern kingdom, that this tradition from refugees got to the south. But now the Deuteronomistic writer uses it to push their ideology or their agenda or their theology. So, the statement that the biblical tradition in Jeremiah takes a strictly Judahite point of view in subordinating Shiloh to Jerusalem is accurate. But in doing that, as Mr. Jabet always said, in doing this, the Bible preserves a vague memory of events that took place in the second half of the 11th century BCE, which archaeology gives us the date. So in pushing your ideology, you confirm data that we have outside of the text. And we now know how the destruction happened, when it happened. It was before what Jeremiah was talking about. And it wasn't because of the destruction of the exiling of the north. This here predates that. Okay.
So, Rabbi.
Mr. Mark.
So is that also indicative of Jeremiah sort of like letting the cat out of the bag as to what was done to demonstrate the rejection of the Saul kingship and inauguration of the Davidic kingship, because he seems to be using the very same literary technique or traditional technique in recalling Shiloh. So it's saying, okay, now what was done to Shiloh is now going to be done to you.
Correct. So we have here, we're finding a cult, a temple, where we can actually start building a case for the name Israel. what we've done is that in the biblical text, if you're not careful, you would date Shiloh earlier, as Jeremiah or the book of Jeremiah is doing here. What we had to do is to set the record straight and say, no, we have a Shiloh that predates what Jeremiah is referencing here. It goes way back. Now, let's focus on that Shiloh and see if we can come as close as possible to a formation of this territorial entity that was named Shechem with a change of name to Israel. Okay. Martin Note, a biblical scholar, speaks to this idea many years ago. He makes a suggestion. I quoted his suggestion in our series or in our class, Exodus, how it did and did not happen. This statement came from Martin Note about the gradual emergence model, the symbiosis model, when we're talking about how Israel got to Canaan. Note states that the Israelites were basically Canaanites who gradually developed a separate identity. How did they do that? He says that they migrated from the lowlands and settled in the central highlands. We understand that. And then he proposes that they took up the worship of Yahweh or the cult of Yahweh. Okay. This was his suggestion. Magnot suggested that before monarchic times, the Israelite population was organized in a league. I cannot pronounce this word. It's difficult for me to pronounce. But it means a league, that is a league of tribes whose institutions functioned around a central shrine. This was what Martin Note suggested in 1966. It's like, okay, we think that Israel became an entity because they rallied around one central shrine. It was the shrine that brought them together. Note's idea was rejected for number one, textual, and number two, archaeological reasons. He just did not have the data. But could a cult place have really served as Note proposed? Could a cult place have really served as a center for a territorial entity? I may agree with him, with Note, and I think the data now points to his suggestion. What do we know about the Shiloh that we are looking at? Shechem's Shiloh, the Shiloh of Shechem. We know that Shiloh was destroyed in a major fire. W.F. Albright, an American biblical scholar, dated this destruction to about the 10th century, 1050 BCE. Why did he come up with this date? You know, when they started digging, the early archaeologists, we say this funny statement. They went digging with a shovel in one hand and the Bible in the other. Their main idea was to prove what the Bible said. So their conclusions were all based on that. we would agree today that that is not the right way to do archaeology. You'd have to let the data speak. Why did Albright date the destruction of Shiloh to 1050 BCE? Simple. They accepted the biblical year numbers for the reign of the early dynasty of David and calculated backwards according to the biblical sequence of events. This is how they came about, or he came about, the date. But that is problematic. Why? Easy. The 40-year reign of the early Davidic dynasty should be taken as a typological number. It's not set. They're just rounding the numbers up. 40 years, 40 years. It's a number the text plays around with. Number two, the biblical sequence of what we call the period, the chaotic period of the Judges, which is followed by the great conquest of David and then the golden empire of Solomon, we know it's all theological constructions. And these are theological constructs of late monarchic authors. So it all falls in the realm of theology. Now we've excavated Shiloh. Now we have carbon data, and it disagrees with Albright. What does the data tell us? We are safe because we are on carbon data. We are not on biblical text. It puts the destruction in the second half of the 11th century. And this is how current archaeological data and then the current scholarship disagrees with Albright.
So when you say the second half of the 11th century, how many years are we saying was between the carbon data and what Albright found? How many years are we talking?
Let me bring up my dates here. Where is it? So you're looking at the late Bronze Age. Albright is putting it at Iron Age 2. The end, he's putting it at the end of Iron Age 1, beginning of Iron Age 2, which will fit the biblical account.
So we're talking about a difference between perhaps 1150 and 900 BC?
Correct, yes.
So less than 200 years.
Pretty much, yes, give and take, correct.
Okay, thank you.
So the data of when Shiloh was destroyed cannot be the 10th century or the 1050 as Albright has it. No, we have to go way back. So we do have evidence of Shiloh as a cultic place. We do have evidence that it was destroyed. When what is destroyed, we go to the late Bronze Age. Okay. When we go to the late Bronze Age, when Shiloh is destroyed, can we find out if there was a major sanctuary at Shiloh? A sanctuary that maybe these people from Shechem rallied around which influenced the name change. So we come to Iron Age 1. Shiloh is destroyed. There are settlements. The name Israel comes not at the destruction, but the resettlement of Shiloh, which is going to be Iron Age 1. When we come to Iron Age 1, can we find out if there was a major sanctuary at Shiloh, which maybe influenced the name change? What does the data tell us? Well, no archaeological trace of a shrine has ever been found at the Shiloh dig from Iron Age 1. And that is something that I think we'd all look out for if we're looking for a place, a cultic place where people would go worship. You would want a shrine, but we haven't found a shrine in the Shiloh dig, Iron Age 1. We found some poultry, but they were not cultic devices like storage vessels. They were not. In a cult, you would have these, like you have in the biblical text, the vessels that need to be gold, all of that. Yes, the poetry from the pillared buildings on earth yielded many storage vessels. There were storage vessels that were used to store stuff, store grain, food, something. Also, there are these pits that usually these sites have, these cultic sites, they have pits where they would put cult vessels. They I don't know how to pronounce that. I won't even try. No. But we did not find these pits or even a modest collection of these cult vessels in Iron Age 1. We did not. We did find, if you leave Iron Age 1, this pit. However, if someone can pronounce it, I will not attempt it. I don't know how to pronounce it. These pits with cult vessels are found at late Bronze Shiloh and early Iron Age 2 in Megiddo and Tanach. They are there. So they are there before Iron Age 1 and after Iron Age 1. But the Iron Age 1 period that we are looking at, where we say there was a name change, we don't have the evidence of the pit with cult vessels. So no pit with cult vessels has been unearthed at Shiloh. Not a single house was found in the several excavated areas. There were some buildings unearthed in the west of Shiloh, but they were for public storage. They were of storage nature. So this is the age that we are trying to find out how the name change happened. And was it around a cultic place? Maybe Shiloh. So we don't find anything solid enough in Iron Age 1, where we are thinking the name change happened. When we go before Iron Age 1, late Bronze Age, if you're looking on my screen, I intentionally bring the ages so that when I'm speaking, you can go back and forth and look at it. So Iron Age 1, this is the evidence that we have, or the lack of evidence. But when we go to late Bronze Age, we also see that there was no settlement at Shiloh, just like the Iron Age one. But they did find these pits with vessels in the northern slope. So before we get to Iron Age 1, where the name change is said to happen, Shiloh was a cultic place. Cultic activities did take place at this site in the late Bronze Age. And just like Iron Age 1, which is our focus, not a single house was found in the late Bronze Age as well. Just like the Iron Age 1, that is our focus, the late Bronze Age, the builders on earth were also of public storage nature. So the conclusion that we can make, looking at the late Bronze Age and Iron Age 1, when we compare the data, we can conclude comfortably that Shiloh seems to be a redistribution or a distribution facility.
Brother Basil, sorry to bother you.
Go ahead, Madam.
Hello? I want to ask you, when you say cultic activity, what do you actually mean in what would be in our modern day? What is the hints that, when you say there's hints of cultic activity, what do you mean? Sorry. So I can get it.
A shrine, a temple where people will go and worship a deity. They may bring spices and food and meal.
Okay, so it'd be like the equivalent of what maybe a Buddhist might give some food to their deity and stuff like that, like in this day and age.
Correct.
Oh, okay. All right. Thanks.
So, Rabbi.
Mr. Mark.
So, placing the evidence of cultic activity in Shiloh in the late Bronze Age would coincide with the Merneptah Steele's reference to an Israel being destroyed. Correct?
Yes. So you have Israel not as a territorial entity, and that is the difference. Beautiful. We have Israel as a people, not a territorial entity, as we'll call them on the verge of becoming a kingdom. Not at all. That is not what Merneptah is talking about.
Right. So my follow-up question then is, we're then looking at two Israels, a Iron Age Israel or Iron Age 2 Israel, and a late Bronze Age Israel. Would that be correct?
We're looking at, correct. So that is where the gray line, we don't know when the transition happened. Is the transition happening, the name change from Shechem to Israel, is it happening at the destruction of the late Bronze Age and then the resettlement, Iron Age 1? Is that where the name change is coming from? We don't have that data. But we know that it changes from Shechem. Merneptah mentions it, and then we see the territorial entity happening in the Iron Age 1.
So could it be possible that the Israel that was referenced in the Merneptah Stele were the individuals that began some sort of cultic activity at what I guess I would call early or proto Shiloh?
Correct. I agree with that statement. That is
so it could possibly be those individuals. And then the reference to of the Merneptah Stele having destroyed these people, if they were the ones that began the cultic activity at Shiloh and they were destroyed, then it would also seem to indicate a destruction of that place as well during the late Bronze Age. Am I correct?
Correct. But one distinct though, Merneptah still is the boast. He's just boasted. It's not what do you call it?
Right. Yeah. I understand.
Correct.
Yeah, I understand that. But if there is some sort of reference, right?
Yes, it means
and
that
there was some type of,
Yep.
then there could be that there was an early Israel that did operate in Shiloh that somehow got revived later on.
True.
You know, maybe there were some remnants ethnologically, and they decided to revive it and whatever. Okay, I just wanted to just try to fit the Merneptah stele into the timeline that you're presenting us. Thank you, I appreciate it.
Yes, I would say maybe Merneptah is seeing this group that is transitioning from Shechem to Israel. He may put them in the category of the Apirus. They may be causing commotion, so he says he destroyed them. Israel is destroyed, which was just a boast. So yes, I that is what I subscribe to. You know, there's this entity forming, but then we know it was Shechem, but then it becomes Israel. What makes the change? Usually it's something to do with the worship, you know, the religious affiliations, as Note mentioned. So, you know, trying to figure out what really took place with the change of the name. Awesome. I hope you're following. This is a class that you would have to listen to over and over again. I know it's a bit complicated.
So what normally in archaeology, biblical archaeology, what predates the changing of a name? Is it the conquering of the land by another people? Is it a collaboration with other people? So if we go from Shechem to Israel, what do you think? We know that the name changed, but what do you think brought about the change?
Yeah, I think with Shechem, what we know about Shechem, what's the name of the guy? I forgot his name.
Yeah, I remember.
Correct.
I do. I just can't recall.
Correct. You see how he was trying to gather people to join his coalition to become part of Shechem. So I would think that at his death, and then at the death of his sons, because they tried to continue what their dad started, you would have all these territorial entities in the highlands maybe come together, you know, to continue what the Abiyu, is that Abiyu? I forgot his name. What it started, you know. So they rally up under one banner instead of rallying under Shechem. Maybe Shechem did not work. Shechem was destroyed. Whatever it is, let's rally maybe with this name change. With El, now we have El as the deity, and then Israel or Azrael, El. Maybe that would have triggered it, you know, to go by a different name. But we don't know.
But it would still be the same people from within that region, based on what you're saying.
Definitely,
yes. Loosely held territorial people.
Correct. I think the same people that Shechem tried to, you know, bring on their side, I think is the same people who would come together to form this Israel. Yeah. So looking at the data from Iron Age 1 and then the Bronze Age, what we see that you have the data that you can verify on both ends is that Shiloh seems to be a redistribution facility. It was not settled. No. There is like I'm saying, there's no direct evidence of Iron Age 1 shrine at Shiloh. We don't have the shrine that maybe we'll see the shrine and say, here's the shrine. You see a shrine? Slam dunk. You can conclude that Shiloh was a cultic place in Iron Age 1. But there is no direct evidence of an Iron Age 1 shrine at Shiloh. Evidence from the Middle and Late Bronze Age seems to hint at the existence of a cult place there. So, before we get to Iron Age 1, we do have evidence of Shiloh being what we are saying that it was. Okay. What happened before we got to Iron Age 1 to Shiloh? Just like we were just discussing, Mr. Mark and Madam Pamela, there is a big wave of settlement of Shiloh in the Middle Bronze Age. When I say settlement, I mean there's activity. The people really are settling in Shechem. But Shiloh here, there is activity. That's what I mean when I say settlement. So there's a big wave of settlement of Shiloh in the Middle Bronze Age. There's huge activity. Then there is a decline of settlement, meaning that there's a decline of activity in the Late Bronze Age. And then Shiloh prospers again in Iron Age 1. This is the same thing that is happening with the settlement. We have a big wave of settlement in the highlands in the Middle Bronze Age, and then there is a decline of settlement in the highland in the Late Bronze Age, and then we see the wave of settlement again in Iron Age 1, and then it stays. That is when you have the Northern Kingdom, the South, coming on the scene as territorial entities. The same data is collected from Shiloh. So what is happening with the highlands is happening with Shiloh as well. So Shiloh was a cultic place. It had a lot of activities, and then the activities declined because those in Shechem, there was a decline, and then Shiloh prospers again. So this is number one, evidence. Number two, there is no evidence of habitation of Shiloh, even in the Middle Bronze and Late Bronze. There's no houses. There's no evidence of habitations, people living in Shiloh. What we have maybe is a fort, a temple, or a palace. We don't know. Why do we say we don't know? Whatever was at Shiloh was standing alone. So you have an artificial hill with huge support walls, which create some sort of a platform on top of the hill. Mr. Jason likes hills. I like hills. The people of the Bible, they like hills, because El is the God of the mountains. The shrine has to be on top. So you're closer to the heavens. So this is what Shiloh looked like a temple mount. Correct, Mr. David. Well, where is Shechem? We're saying that Shiloh is not populated, but Shechem was. We know Shechem is connected to Shiloh in a certain form. Well, Shechem is just 15 kilometers, 9 miles from Shiloh. It's the nearest major site in the Middle Bronze Age. Now we're getting somewhere. Shechem is here. Shiloh is here. We know Shechem was the hub, pretty much the capital. And we have this cultic place in Shiloh. When Shechem is inhabited, Shiloh is active. When Shechem is not inhabited, Shiloh is not active. When Shechem is re-inhabited, Shiloh becomes active again. So we see that Shiloh is connected to Iron Age 1 Shechem. Even though in Iron Age 1 we don't get what we want to see, we see them in the Middle Bronze Age and the Late Bronze Age. but Shiloh is absolutely connected to Iron Age 1 Shechem. Any questions here so far? Comments? So what we have here is a territorial entity with many settlements, with its hub, its capital at Shechem, and a temple place at Shiloh. And then there is a transition from the name Shechem of the Iron Age 1 territorial entity to the name Israel. And then the kingdom of Israel is going to emerge shortly after.
There's no return to the name Shechem.
There's no return to the name Shechem. So we have the northern kingdom, and then Samaria becomes like the capital. So if you ask me, this is my own theory. I think what happened when so this guy in Shechem, I forgot his name. What happened when he died and his sons could not, they tried to take after him, but could not really bring the territories that the father tried to bring together. I think when they failed to do that, one wouldn't want to go with the name Shechem. Maybe it was something that failed. So now these people that the petty king in Shechem tried to bring together come together, reorganize, but they reorganize around the old ancient deity of Israel. No, let me rephrase that. The old ancient deity of Canaan, which is El.
And what was Shechem organized around? What was their deity?
No, Shechem.
I know.
No, Shechem is also El. Yes, Shechem will worship the deity El. We have evidence of that. No. But when the petty kings were trying to rally the people together, I think we were rallying the people together to take over the territory that their overlord in Egypt actually has. So they would be looked upon as the Apirus. Pretty much. They're not the Apirus, but I would put them in that category. When the petty kings were trying to gain territory, they were not doing it under the banner of the deity. They were doing it to take back or to win over territory that the Egyptians, were overlords of. But this here now changes. What is bringing them together is not to take land, but to actually rally around a deity, I would say.
Thank you, Rabbi.
To become one people. That's, we all worship this deity, so we are one. Just as the biblical text makes Jacob and Esau twins because of the deity Yahweh that Esau worshipped, that Jacob came to inherit. Awesome. So we have a strong case that Shiloh was the place of cultic activity in the Middle Bronze Age, Late Bronze Age. It stayed like that in Iron Age 1, even though we don't have the evidence that we would want to have. So we've established Shiloh as a cultic place. Note is saying that he thinks this is what brought together the entity known as Israel, is this cult and the deity of that cult. Well, the name of the deity worshipped at Shiloh is connected to the worship of the old ancient deity of the land, who is El. Now, the interesting thing is that the location of the worship of this deity, all concentrate around Shiloh.